Hi guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. So today I'm going to share with you all of the books that I read during the month of June. I read 10 books this month, which was pretty good considering a lot of them, I wouldn't say a lot of them, more than typical were actually physical books that I read this month. So that was really exciting for me. But let's hop into it and I'll share with you my thoughts on some of these books. So I think this month I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Instead of going in the order that I read the books, I think I'm going to share them with you in the order that I ranked them. So starting with my least favorite and working my way up to my favorite book that I read this month. I will also mention that I have read 2 of the books on my project where I'm reading the 5 books that have been on my TBR the longest. So I did finish The Green Glass Sea, and I also finished, let me grab it, Orphan Train this month. So I will share my reviews and my thoughts and my ratings for these 2 books on my wrap-up video for that specific project. So I'm not going to be sharing those with you today, but those were 2 of the books that I read this month. So of the other 8, my least favorite book that I read this month was a graphic novel, and it was titled Artichoke Tales. It is by Megan Kelso. This was like a cover buy, basically, from the library, which I guess it's not a cover buy, that's a cover borrow. Anyway, I saw the illustrations and stuff and thought that it looked really cute, and the illustrations are cute. The people have like heads that look like artichokes, and so it's just kind of fun. And this is about like 3 generations of a family, and it's going through like a civil war in this made-up world. There just didn't seem to be a point to it, in my opinion. I got to the end, and I think my Goodreads review pretty much says, what was the point? I didn't understand a lot of what was going on. I didn't understand the characters' motives. I didn't understand any of that. So I ended up giving this 2 stars. I didn't give it 1 star mostly because of the illustrations, and I did enjoy the illustrations aspect of it. But this is an adult graphic novel. There is some nudity and stuff in it, which was kind of bizarre. But yeah, so that was kind of not impressed with this one. So that was my least favorite book. And then after that, my other book that I gave 2 stars this month, and I was really sad about this one, but that was King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. I initially, when I first finished it, I gave it 3 stars, and then I ended up bumping it down to 2 stars. This I did as a buddy read with Emily from Books for Life, so I will link her channel down below. But we read this together. I have loved all of Leigh Bardugo's other Grishaverse books that I have read. So the Shadow and Bone series I really enjoyed. 6 of Crows and Crooked Kingdom I thoroughly enjoyed. And so this I was really excited to pick up. This is the first book in the Nikolai duology, and it follows Nikolai as he takes over the throne and is ruling Ravka, which is the country that they live in, the fictional country that they live in. This is fantasy, young adult. But yeah, and so you definitely have to read the Grisha trilogy and Crooked Kingdom to be able to understand this book. So that was something you definitely have to. This book is told in 3, sometimes 4 different perspectives. So you get Nikolai's perspective, and then you also get Zoya's perspective, who we meet in the Grishaverse trilogy, and Nina's perspective, who we first meet in the 6 of Crows duology. And so you get those 3 storylines. I really enjoyed Zoya's storyline in this. Nikolai's storyline I thought was really boring. Nina's storyline just didn't fit with the story of Nikolai and Zoya. Nikolai and Zoya are together for most of this, and so their storylines kind of coincide with each other. But Nina's storyline seemed like it could have been a completely separate book in and of itself, and it could have been like the Ravkin War, like, because it's all kind of building up to a war, and it could have maybe been something like that and been a series, and Nina's story would have been a completely separate book, because her storyline in this book has nothing to do with the other 2 perspectives in this book. And so it was just really weird. And the transition between like perspectives, like each chapter was a different perspective, and the transition between those was very sharp and abrupt, and it just didn't flow. The writing in this was not good. I feel like this was definitely Leigh Bardugo's weakest writing that I've ever written or ever read, and that includes all three of the Grishaverse books, which were not great writing style, but the storyline I really enjoyed. The writing in this was not good. It was just boring. I didn't really ever want to pick it up. It's like over 500 pages. It's 511 pages long. It was way too long for the story that it did have. I felt like the magic even in this was a lot more confusing than the typical Grisha. Like, I've never been confused in reading the Grisha trilogy or the Six of Crows duology with the Grisha magic system. And in this, I was completely confused for parts of it. I feel like it just wasn't well explained. It was just, I did not enjoy it. I'll leave it at that. So if you have read this and you have similar opinions, I would love to hear, because most people who have read this enjoy it, and I think they enjoy it because they're such huge Grishaverse fans that they feel like they have to enjoy it. But I'd be interested to see if anybody else felt the same way as I did, as far as not enjoying the writing style and being bored for most of it. I know Emily liked this a lot more than I did. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. The next book that I'm going to share with you is When Life Gives You Lululemons by Lauren Weisberger. And this is an audiobook that I listened to as part of the Buzzword Readathon that was hosted by Books and Lala this month. I read 2 books for that readathon, but I basically went into my library's app where I check out my audiobooks, and I just typed in audiobook, what's available now. And I was looking for something really lighthearted because I had been reading a lot of historical fiction. And so I just wanted something fluffy and light that wasn't going to be too in-depth. And I found this. And this is a book that is part of the Devil Wears Prada series. I never read the second book in this series, but I did read the first book quite a few years ago. And I don't think you need to read any of the previous books to really be able to read this. It follows Emily, the character of Emily, if you've seen the movie or read the book. It follows the character of Emily from The Devil Wears Prada, and she's currently living in LA, and she is not assistant, I don't really know what you would call it, to celebrities. She basically like gets them out of crises and things like that, helps them find clothes to wear for events, and just kind of is on call for them. But she gets a call to go to New York, and when she's in New York, she ends up staying with a friend, and her friend has a friend who is going through a crisis. Her husband is a senator, and he's like set her up for this crime, and so she's trying to clear her name, and so they end up getting Emily involved to help with her. And it's just kind of these 3 women, Emily and her friend and the senator's wife, and it's their each individual story with their husbands and what's going on with each of them. And it was good. It was nothing to write home about. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, life-changing, anything like that, but it was good. It was enjoyable. It made me chuckle here and there. I could relate to one of the characters quite a lot, and so I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars, and it was a quick listen. So if you're up for something like that, that might be a good book for you to check out. My next book that I rated 3 stars is Dear Martin by Nick Stone. This is one that I read as part of my In Real Life book club. I read this pretty early in the month, and I enjoyed this quite a bit. I enjoyed the meaning behind it and the story behind it. A lot of people say, read this if you liked The Hate U Give. And I read The Hate U Give and I rated it 5 stars. I loved it. But upon further introspection and really thinking about it and reading some other reviews about it and such, I really I might go back and lower my rating a little bit on that, only because The Hate U Give really promotes violence. And I don't agree with that. And it really, I mean, it has a lot to do with finding your voice, and that I agree with, but I don't agree with the violence aspect of it. Now, this book is also has to deal with an African American boy who sees something happen to one of his friends, and how is he going to react to it. And his take on it is that he is going to start writing letters to Martin Luther King Jr. and just kind of getting his feelings out and striving to be like Martin and be peaceful about it, but still try to make a stand when he can, but be peaceful about it. And I really respected that aspect of the story. The reason it got a lower rating for me is because the way that it's written, it bounces back and forth between third person and first person quite a bit. And then there's sections of the book that are written out in like play form almost, where it's like you have the character's name and then what they said. And so it's like, you know, written like that. And then that even goes back and forth between third person, and then there's some that are done in first person, but in that like play format. And it's just weird to read. I ended up listening to it, but either way you do it, it just didn't flow well. It's almost like they needed to pick which voice they wanted to tell it in and what style they wanted to tell it in, and then write the story, because the story itself was really good, but the writing style was not my cup of tea at all. And so that's why I ended up only giving it 3 stars. All right, moving on to my 4-star books. I have 2 4-star books to share with you, and they're both graphic novels. So first I have Sisters by Raina Telgemeier. This was on my summer TBR, where I mentioned that I wanted to read all of Raina Telgemeier's backlist because she is coming out with a new graphic novel here in the coming months. And my kids have read all of her graphic novels, and so I just want to read them because I think it'd be fun. So I made it through Sisters. It took me like a day. It's a middle grade graphic novel. It's kind of a memoir of sorts. It covers Raina, like a summer that her and her family go on a road trip, and her relationship with her sister. And it's a very strained relationship, and it kind of gets into some of the history of it. You'll notice, like, when you flip through the book, there's some pages that are white, and then there's some pages that are yellow, and the yellow are all of the historical setting for it, like the flashbacks. Mind fart. The flashbacks that are throughout the story of how and why things are the way they are with her and her sister. And I really, really enjoyed this. I have a sister. We didn't always get along, and I could really, really relate to this quite a bit. I thought that this was done really, really well, and this is definitely one that I'm glad that my kids have read, and I encourage them to reread over and over because I think that it is fantastic. The other graphic novel that I ended up rating 4 stars is Tomboy by Liz Prince. This, I was pleasantly surprised by this. I didn't know going into it how I would feel about it, but this is the story. It's also a graphic memoir. It is the story of Liz's experience being a tomboy, and not the girly tomboy where you go out and you want to play baseball with the boys, but you still have the braids and you still have the pink shoes and all of that. This covers Liz wanting to dress like a boy. She wore little boys' underwear, and she wanted to wear boys' clothes, and she wore really baggy clothes, and she had her hair, she always wore a baseball cap, and she kind of had her hair cut short. And she was interested in stereotypical boy things, and it was very insightful because Liz identifies as a woman. So it's not a transgender story. It's just a gender identity story where she is a woman. She wants to be seen as a woman, but she likes dressing like a guy. And she has masculine qualities about her personality and things like that. And it was very, very good. It goes through, it starts when she is little. Let's see, 1986. Let's see. Yeah, it's like she's like 3 years old, 4 years old, and then it goes all the way up until like she's in college. And I just thought that this was really, really, really well done. It is shelved at my library in the YA section, but I just thought it was great. It goes through having boyfriends, and she is attracted to boys, and are boys going to like her because boys like girls, like boys typically like girls that dress like girls and are girly. And so she was having crushes on these boys, and they weren't reciprocating because they didn't see her as a girl, and her friends didn't want to be friends with her, and it was just really, really good. I really like this one. I would recommend this one if you're interested in things like that, because I think that this was a really good take on something just a little bit different. So anyway, that is my thoughts on Tomboy. All right, moving on to my 5-star books. The first one I want to talk about is The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. I got that right. Okay. Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. That is a tongue twister. All right. I read this also as part of my In Real Life book club. So we did 2 books this month. This was fantastic. This follows the story of a little girl who is shipped out of London during World War II and goes to live with this lady out in the country. And in London, her mother severely abuses her, like really bad. The little girl has a club foot. Her mom doesn't take care of it. And so she goes to live on this farm out in the country. And it's just kind of about her growing up there and her learning how to be loved and her knowing that she's capable of being loved. And it's also the story of the lady that's taking care of her and her learning how she is able to give love. And it is so, 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 so good. It is heartbreaking. I think it is very realistic as far as its portrayal of this little girl who was abused and the scars that leaves and the anxiety that she has and the turmoil, the inner turmoil that she goes through and the guilt, and just, it's such a wonderfully written book. I loved this book. I am planning on picking up the second book in this series this upcoming month, and I think it will be fantastic. So definitely read this one. It is middle grade. I don't know if I mentioned that. Yeah, fantastic. And then the last book that I want to talk about today is my favorite book of the month, if not of the year, and that is Hum If You Don't Know the Words by Bianca Marais. This book, let me just tell you, this is one I also read as a buddy read. I read this with Krista from Books and Jams, and I am so glad I read it with her because we had great conversation about this book. This book follows a little 10-year-old white girl and a 50-year-old black lady, both living in apartheid South Africa. It's set in 1976. And so it follows just their different experiences. The little white girl's parents early in the story are killed by a couple of black people, and so she has a lot of feelings about that. Her aunt gets custody of her, and her aunt doesn't necessarily want custody of her. And so throughout the story, these two storylines intersect, and these two women, ladies, girl and woman, get to know each other and impact each other greatly. And if you can't tell by all of that, this is when I started finally realizing I needed to be tabbing. And this was all the stuff leading up to this. But yeah, I had feelings about this book. The way that it is written, Bianca Marais has an ability to phrase sentences magically. The impact that her words have in this book are life-changing. This is one of those easily five stars right out of the gate because it was life-changing. There were things that she wrote about and sentences that she wrote that will impact my life forever. And those types of books are the books that immediately will always get 5 stars from me. This book goes through so much, from grief to hope to acceptance of yourself, acceptance of love from somebody else, acceptance by other people, accepting other people who aren't like you. It's so good, and I implore every single person to read this because it is fantastic. fantastic. Yeah. If you have read this, I would love to chat with you about it, because this is just one of those books. Like I said, I have a lot of feelings about it. It really, really struck a chord with me. And the writing style, so good. All right, enough about that. So those are the 8 books that I'm going to talk about today. And then, of course, I'll mention the 2 other books in a later video. But if you have read any of these, I would love to know your experiences and your thoughts about them. Leave those in the comments down below. I really, really enjoy connecting with you guys that way. But other than that, I hope that you stick around, and I hope that you subscribe. And until next time, see ya.